Al ingreso del doctor Alejandro Yamatei, presidente de la República de Guatemala. Y de la excelentísima señora Kamala Harris, vicepresidenta de los Estados Unidos de América. Seguidamente, el mensaje de la excelentísima señora Kamala Harris, vicepresidenta de los Estados Unidos de América.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Muchas gracias, señor
And thank you
presidente.
for warmly welcoming
Le agradezco
me and
por
our
haberme
delegation
recibido
to
con
Guatemala.
tanta calidez a Guatemala. La verdad es que sostuvimos una conversación robusta, cándida, sobre los muchos temas que son prioritarios para cada uno de nuestros países. El presidente y yo hemos hablado sobre una creencia fundamental, que es que la mayoría de la gente no quiere partir de sus casas, dejando atrás el lugar de donde son originarios, donde se habla el idioma propio, donde la cultura que conocen está presente. En ese caso, desde hace siglos, la mayoría de la gente no quiere estar lejos de donde vive su abuela. Y cuando lo hacen, cuando se van, es por uno de dos motivos. Por lo general es porque huyen de algún tipo de daño o porque quedarse significa que no podrán proveerse de las necesidades esenciales de las de su familia. El presidente y yo compartimos esa creencia firme de que nuestra responsabilidad y nuestra capacidad es insuflarle un poco de esperanza a la gente. Hemos hablado mucho sobre esto en las muchísimas conversaciones obtenidas. El poder de la esperanza, la capacidad que tiene cada uno de nuestros gobiernos de darle una idea a la gente de que la esperanza viene, que la ayuda viene en camino. Entonces, que sepan que se les ve, que los escuchamos, que vemos su capacidad y que entendemos también sus desafíos y su necesidad de recibir el apoyo necesario, los recursos necesarios para poder no tan solo sobrevivir, sino vivir bien. Fue ese el espíritu de nuestra conversación. Y como le dije al señor presidente, yo creo que nuestro mundo está interconectado e interdependiente y, sin lugar a dudas, las cuestiones más recientes que han plagado nuestro orbe, inclusive la pandemia, han puesto de manifiesto este hecho, la interconectividad e interdependencia de nuestro mundo y, por ende, lo que suceda en el exterior es también prioritario aquí en Estados Unidos. Por eso me encuentro en Guatemala el día de hoy y por eso el presidente Joe Biden va a viajar más tarde esta semana a Europa, porque estamos renovando nuestras relaciones en todas partes del mundo y marcando presencia en todas partes del mundo. La semana pasada, dicho sea de paso, compartí con el presidente que Estados Unidos va a brindar una donación de 500,000 vacunas a Guatemala, y eso porque entendemos la
United States will provide as a first donation 500,000 vaccines to Guatemala. Again, understanding the interdependence, the connection between us, and the importance of looking out for and prioritizing the needs of one's neighbor. I am proud to report that the agreements between President Yamatei and I have made today will strengthen the security and the prosperity for both the people of Guatemala and the people of the United States. And before we get to the questions, I just want to highlight several of those agreements. First, on the issue of security, is probably one of the highest priorities for each of our nations. The President and I agreed to continue our work to manage migration at Guatemala's northern and southern borders. We also discussed illicit drugs that are being smuggled and humans who are being trafficked across those borders, undermining the security of both the people of Guatemala and the people of the United States. Our nations have collaborated on these issues, and we will create a smuggling and human trafficking task force, which will work with local law enforcement to stop these crimes. And I have personally worked on these cases in my career and can say that when we see some of the most vulnerable in our communities being taken advantage of, being sold for profit, being abused, it should be a priority for all of us who care about the human condition and humanity. Second, on economic development, the President and I also discussed the root causes of migration, in particular, the lack of economic opportunity for many people here in Guatemala. The United States recognizes that it is both in our interest and reflective of our values to help create that opportunity and to share in economic prosperity. We will launch a Young Women's Empowerment Initiative to increase education and economic opportunities for girls and women. Understanding here in Guatemala, there is a rich tradition of girls and women being a part of the culture and the economy with extraordinary skills, and therefore the ability to thrive when seen as someone who can be the source of investment for the economic growth of the entire community. We will also invest in agribusiness and affordable housing and supporting entrepreneurs. President Giammattei has mentioned to me many times today and in previous conversations about his priority around what can happen in terms of the planting of trees and what that can mean in terms of ecology and in our environment. Well, recently, there's been a lot of talk about ecopreneurs, entrepreneurs who are focused on climate, who are focused on what might happen, which is to protect our environment, but also see the capacity for jobs and economic development as a connection with that pursuit. I will also continue to work with CEOs around the world to encourage investment in Guatemala. And, Mr. President, I look forward to working with you on that. As I shared with you in Washington, D.C., I recently convened some of our biggest CEOs who have a profound interest, for many reasons, on supporting the work that happens here and the work that can happen here in Guatemala to, again, uplift folks who may have been overlooked or neglected, but also uplift the natural capacity and resources of this beautiful country. Which brings me to our third area of discussion and agreement. The President and I discussed the importance of anti-corruption and the importance of an independent judiciary. The United States will create an anti-corruption task force, the first of its kind. Our Justice Department, our Treasury Department, and our State Department will work together to conduct investigations and train local law enforcement to conduct their own. Our task force will support Guatemalan prosecutors, including FICI, and listen, no corruption. Corruption does not know borders, and we want to make sure that this is about transnational crime, and we have to follow the money, and we have to stop it. And that's what we intend to do. I can tell you from my work on this issue years ago, follow the money. The underlying reason for so much of what we are seeing in terms of this level and type of corruption is about profit. It is about profit without concern for the damage it creates to real human life, to families, to children, to communities. And I want to emphasize that the goal of our work is to help Guatemalans find hope at home. At the same time, I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border. There are legal methods by which migration can and should occur. But we, as one of our priorities, will discourage illegal migration. And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back. So let's discourage our friends, our neighbors, our family members from embarking on what is otherwise an extremely dangerous journey, where in large part the only people who benefit are coyotes. And let us do our work together, Mr. President, again, with our mutual commitment of knowing that hope is on the way. And I believe the actions we take together will improve the lives of Guatemalans. And as I meet with Guatemalan community members and leaders throughout this day, I will speak with them on what more can be done. Again, Mr. President, I want to thank you for such a productive conversation, for your role of leadership, and for the work we have yet to do together. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question will come from Alex Jaffe from the Associated Press.
Sure. Thank you both for taking questions. Madam Vice President, you just spoke about this. You've spoken about this in the past, the need to combat corruption to address the root causes of migration. But given President Giamatei's record on the issue, his criticism and objections to and resistance to anti-corruption reformers in the nation, has he given you any commitments that he will not try to interfere in anti-corruption efforts in the nation? And what makes you believe that you can trust him as a partner on that issue? And then President Giamatei, what do you say to critics who say that you are in fact part of the problem of corruption in your nation and that you don't take combating it seriously? And then one more, just because we're going to Mexico tomorrow. Madam Vice President, there have been questions about why you and President Biden have yet to visit the border, the U.S. southern border. And I'm wondering if you can answer some of those. Republicans have charged that you're not taking the situation there seriously. So how do you respond to that criticism, and when will that visit come?
So on the issue of corruption, as you know, the President of the United States recently issued a very clear statement about where we as the United States stand on this issue. It was unambiguous that we will look to root out corruption wherever it exists because we know it is not in the best interest of a democracy. The President speaks, the United States President Joe Biden speaks a lot about this, and actually President Giamatei and I spoke about that today. If we are truly to have and fight for democracies, especially in a world where increasingly they are under attack, one essential ingredient of our priorities must be to fight corruption. It erodes the confidence that people have in their government and its leaders. It compromises the ability of any country to maximize its natural resources to help and support its citizenry. On the issue of any corruption, on the issue of Guatemala, that has been one of our highest priorities in terms of the focus that we have placed here after the President asked me to take on this issue of focusing on this region of the world. And the work we are doing in furtherance then of that priority is the work of, again, creating an anti-corruption task force, bringing a renewed effort on behalf of the United States Department of Justice, the United States Treasury Department, the United States State Department, to work collaboratively to identify, to support investigations, and ultimately to support prosecutions and consequences for those who would endeavor to engage in corrupt behaviors. Furthermore, in bringing together the CEOs that we have been doing in the United States and convening them, they've made very clear that when it comes to the private sector, be it there or I might venture to say here or anywhere around the world, they want to know if they're going to put their hard-earned resources into any issue or initiative, that it will go to its intended beneficiary. And that means going to the people who need that support and not corrupt hands. There are many reasons why this is one of our highest priorities, which I think the people of Guatemala know well, and the people of the United States understand well. If we are to be effective, if we are to be true to our principles, we must root out corruption wherever it exists, and that is one of our highest priorities for that reason. On the issue of Republicans' political attacks or criticism or even concerns, the reason I am here in Guatemala as my first trip as Vice President of the United States is because this is one of our highest priorities, and I came here to be here on the ground to speak with the leader of this nation around what we can do in a way that is significant, is tangible, and has real results. And I will continue to be focused on that kind of work as opposed to grand gestures.
Madam Vice President, good to see you. I know corruption has been a big focus of your work on this issue in recent months. You talked a little bit about it. I'm curious, more specifically, do you consider the governments of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, or any other in this region to be corrupt? And you just told people in this region, quote, do not come, do not come. Would it be fair to perceive the Biden administration's work on stemming illegal immigration to be a failure if, because they're so desperate, they still keep coming? And I'm curious, as you stand here in this room, throw one more at you, if you could reflect on the history that you're making today. You're the first American female vice president to represent the country outside the country in a region of the world where there aren't many senior female leaders. Y señor presidente, mi compañera lo preguntó. Lo que usted dice a los críticos que piensen que usted es una parte del problema de la corrupción en esta región. ¿Qué piensa usted? Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. So, on the issue of corruption, the conversation that I had with President Giammattei today was very frank and very candid, and I think this is a quality that he and I appreciate in each other. We don't have time for glossing over concerns that we have. And so we did have a very frank conversation about the importance of an independent judiciary. We had a conversation about the importance of a strong civil society. I expressed concerns about those issues, including what is the potential here for tax reform, something like tax reform, which is very much connected with a lot of the concerns that we have. And so we had a candid conversation as it relates to those concerns. And I do believe that with the work that we are doing, some of it which is new, there have been many attempts at collaboration between the United States and this region of the world over many years, as you know. Some have worked, some have not. There are aspects of what we are doing now that are new and also are based on this new era. Again, where there's, I think, a greater appreciation for the interdependence and the interconnection. And so we are creating this task force to address corruption. We are working on a task force that is about human smuggling. We are doing the work of requiring certain progress be made if we are going to attract U.S. investment, private investment in this region. And that is also a new approach, a relatively new approach, which is to bring together the private sector, understanding that the United States government cannot alone do the kind of work that we believe we have collectively the capacity to do. So we have good reason to believe that we can have an impact. And in addition, there was a question about what's happening in terms of immigration as a general matter. Ali Mayorkas, who of course is the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, is going to be working on, through CBP, a relationship with Guatemalan border authorities on what we have named the Mobile Tactical Interdiction Unit, again focused on what needs to happen to put law enforcement resources as appropriate onto the issue of what is going on in terms of really abusive and criminal behaviors among people who are predatory in nature and are preying on vulnerable people. Your final point, I'm honored to represent my country here in Guatemala. I am honored to be here in a nation that has a history that goes back thousands of years. As I was walking through this building and appreciating the Mayan art that adorns the walls, knowing of the work that women and girls are doing and have yet the capacity to do in Guatemala, and to the extent that I can have any impact based on my gender and the fact that I am the first, I welcome that. I welcome showing anyone, whatever your race or gender, that you may be the first to do anything, make sure you're not the last, and in that way, let's pave a path where we create an opportunity for others to become the first in their family or their community, to do those things that perhaps others didn't think they were capable of, but God has given them that capacity to achieve, and with a little help, they will. One of the areas of focus for us is the issue of hunger, hurricanes, pandemic, and what these acute factors have caused in terms of the reason for the migration that we are seeing. And when we look at then the capacity that we have to give support for people to be able to stay, we look at, as an example, what I mentioned earlier, the Young Women's Empowerment Initiative. In fact, Samantha Power, who is the new head of USAID, is putting a lot of attention into the capacity we have to support the indigenous community here. It's a big area of focus for me, given the fact, and I talked about this with the President, that we see that there are a lot of people from those regions of Guatemala that are leaving not because they want to, but because they have no resources. So this is the predominant approach that we are taking, which is to look at the root causes and the acute causes and deal with those in a productive way. And many of our initiatives, as I said earlier, are new initiatives. These are efforts that have not been tried in the past, which we believe will be quite productive, again, when we approach it in a collaborative way, not only from the U.S. government's perspective of an all-of-government approach, but bringing in the private sector, bringing in philanthropy, bringing in civil society, both here in Guatemala and around the world, and internationalizing our effort. For example, I have talked with the Prime Minister of Japan, the leader of South Korea, who have all agreed to join us in our focus on Guatemala, and that is the way that we are approaching our work.
Honores al egreso del doctor Alejandro Yamatei, presidente de la República de Guatemala, y de la excelentísima señora Kamala Harris, vicepresidenta de los Estados Unidos de América.